Hello, and welcome to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today's topic is on Palantir. The graphic on your screens now is one of an immigration customs enforcement surveillance officer from the United States of America observing three absolutely naked human beings, two adults and a child, facing them in a glass bowl. And that is, of course, a commentary on the overburdening surveillance power of the state. That is the topic for today because the British press is reporting that the British Medical Association, the BMA, has, through its lobbying, triggered UK government ministers to launch queries into scrapping the £330 million UK National Health Service contract with Peter Thiel's AI surveillance technocratic company Palantir, named after the all-seeing stones controlled by the evil Lord Saruman in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You couldn't make it up. That is literally why Peter Thiel named his company Palantir. Rather on the nose, perhaps the hiding in plain sight is the strategy that Palantir, under their CEO Alex Karp and their founder Peter Thiel of the PayPal Mafia, have adopted. But nevertheless, today's stream we'll go through the details into precisely what the concerns are of the British Medical Association. That is the members body, national members body of doctors and medical professionals in the UK. They are launching formal complaints about the UK government's contract, £330 million contract with the AI surveillance firm, the American military intelligence linked CIA backed and funded surveillance firm founded by PayPal Mafia member Peter Thiel, named Palantir. That is the topic of the stream today here on the Warrior Creed with me, the radical Majid Nawaz, and we'll be going into details with you right after these introductory credits.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And as discussed in the introduction, today's topic is on the surveillance state. The graphic, the political cartoon you can see on your screens now by one Paul Daginsky, a political satirist, depicting a family in a glass fish bowl, being observed by the overbearing, oversized surveillance state, labeled conveniently as ICE. Of course, that the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement agents, they are connected to this Palantir story, which we will go into over the course of this stream. But for the meanwhile, just to explain the political cartoon, part of what the company Palantir has contracts with in terms of the US government is for collecting data on predicting where so-called illegal immigrants will be, and then providing that data to ICE, the US government department responsible for the raids that led to the riots last few months ago. And Palantir is the company that is not only responsible for providing the surveillance data on undocumented migrants in the United States of America, but that's the same company that was providing AI military targeting software to Israel during their ethnic cleansing of Gaza. So this company is of particular concern, and the political cartoon for today's stream is a commentary on that concern. But the particular story today that we want to bring to you is one reported by the Times in London, and that is that the national membership body for the British Medical Association in the UK, known as the BMA, have raised some concerns about this company Palantir's £330 million contract with the British National Health Service, or the NHS. And here on your screens now is the Times article from today. We will enlarge this for you so you can see it there yourselves. Headlined, Ministers Seek Advice on Scrapping Palantir NHS Data Contract. Subheading, the tech giant systems have helped to cut waiting lists, but it has been criticized for its work for the US military and intelligence services. Now, the concern there in the image, you see some protesters with placards depicting a sign saying your NHS data up for grabs. The concern there is the health data. Because, of course, the National Health Service in the UK, unlike in the United States of America, there is you in America have a federal system. Here in the UK, there is no federal system. It's a unitary system under which Parliament is sovereign, and Parliament has absolute control over all of the United Kingdom in a devolved sense. So there is, of course, a Scottish government and a Welsh government, but those governments have been granted the license to exist by a sovereign act of Parliament under the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Here in the United Kingdom, Parliament is supreme and reigns supreme, and Parliament, as one supreme body, is not separate from the executive. The Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office and the governing party in the United Kingdom are all basically the same as Parliament, because the party that gains a majority in the legislative chamber, the party that gains a majority in Parliament, is the party that ends up forming government. So currently, the Labour Party under Keir Starmer has a majority in Parliament, and because it has a majority in Parliament, gets the right to form the executive branch. And Keir Starmer is both the leader of the majority party in Parliament, the Labour Party, as well as being the Prime Minister running the executive branch of government. There is no separation of powers here in the United Kingdom. And that is why Americans often underestimate the dangers of controlling national databases here in the UK, because we don't have any separation of powers, unlike the federal system in the UK, in the US. So, for example, during COVID, another topic related to Palantir's grabbing of our national databases here in the UK, because Palantir, as we're going to get to, had a role in the COVID mandates here too in the UK. But just to touch on that COVID topic for a second, during the COVID period, unlike in the United States of America, because of its federal system, here in the UK, under our system, where we have no separation of powers, the entire country was placed under a lockdown in one clean sweep for many months on end. Every single corner of the country was placed in a lockdown because there is no separation of powers here in the UK. So whereas in the US, some states chose to go stricter or harsher than others, the UK uniformly across the nation was for many, many months under one strict lockdown, one strict mask mandate, and one vaccine mandate. So because of the fact that there is no separation of powers here in the UK, any private corporate entity that gets a contract with government to manage our country's health data gets automatic control over the entire country's health data. And this is the concern with Palantir, because Palantir was recently awarded a £330 million contract by the UK government. And as you're going to see in this stream, it was awarded by the very same people that ran the COVID mandates in this country. They granted Palantir access to all of our health data, and Palantir is the very same country that ran the COVID dashboard, updating the data every day, providing the evidence for the government to continue their COVID mandates, including their lockdowns, their mask mandates, and their vaccine mandates. So it is quite clearly a messy scene in which it's all of them patting each other on the back. And as you're going to see in this stream, government ministers and employees leaving government to join Palantir in leadership positions, and vice versa. Leadership positions in Palantir leaving Palantir to join government in leading positions. It is quite messy, and this is what we're going to demonstrate over the course of this stream. But it's primarily why that summary is primarily why the British Medical Association has begun to raise alarms about the level of control Palantir may be able to gain through having access to our national data. And that is why here you see this Times headline today: ministers seek advice on scrapping Palantir NHS data contract. The article opens with the line, "The government has sought advice on scrapping a significant NHS contract delivered by Palantir over the tech giant's work for the American government." Now, the Financial Times, again on your screens now, reports the same thing. In fact, the Times article is based over this Financial Times piece entitled "Ministers Explore Triggering Break Clause in Palantir's NHS Contract." The ministers under Keir Starmer are beginning to pay attention to the worry, even though it was Keir Starmer under this Labour government, the supposed left-wing party that signed this contract, the party prior to this, under Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives, laid the groundwork, but were also addressing some of the dangers of AI having too much control over our daily lives. But Keir Starmer, once he was elected, as with all things, entirely capitulated to the pressures that must have clearly been on him by the Epstein class. We also will, of course, remind you, as Radical Media has covered many times, that Peter Thiel has many times appeared in somewhat questionable circumstances in meetings with Epstein, the head of the CIA, Burns at the time, and in multiple times in Epstein's diary, as well as for meetings, that is, as well as other areas of concern with his relationship with Epstein. We're going to come to all of that too. So there are, despite these concerns, Keir Starmer, as with other matters related to Epstein, such as his appointment of Lord Mandelson, Keir Starmer forged ahead in agreeing that contract with Palantir. So, of course, there are questions there as well, which we will come to. But of particular concern, which again we're going to raise on your screens now, considering the fact we're talking about the dangers of technocracy and a unified AI database of all of our personal data being run from one source, a private company, a bit like Lex Luthor in Superman, but instead founded by Peter Thiel, with his very Lex Luthor-like character, Alex Karp, as we're going to see in a moment, behaving very much like Lex Luthor. The concerns there are over the level of control that company has over our private data. That's the concern the British Medical Association have raised. And it doesn't help, as you can see from the Times report on the 30th of March, that the executive vice chairman of Palantir in the UK is none other than Louis Mosley, related to the actual founder of the British fascists, Oswald Mosley. Now, of course, it behooves us at this stage to state there one big fat caveat. There is no, of course, inevitability that grandson Mosley shares his grandfather Oswald Mosley's fascist positions. Though, of course, it is relevant that he ends up becoming the UK head of a openly pro-surveillance state company such as Palantir. And so to continue reading from the quote in the Times newspaper there, we'll blow this up on your screens. This is the concern that the British Medical Association and others have, and they've raised it now with ministers. Louis Mosley, Executive Vice Chair of Palantir in the UK, urged ministers not to give in to the ideologically motivated campaigners who are demanding that the NHS cut its links with the company because of its work for the US defense sector and immigration and customs enforcement, or ICE. Now, that is his response. Palantir UK have responded by saying these are just ideologically motivated campaigners. But ministers, according to the Times, as is on your screens now, have sought advice on triggering a break clause in Palantir's contract to provide data systems to NHS hospitals that help them to manage waiting lists, speed up discharging patients, and use operating theatres more effectively. The company is 2 years into a 7-year, 330 million contract, but is facing calls from doctors to be stripped of its role in the health service. Now, of course, Palantir UK will point to some of the benefits of this contract. It does behoove us at this stage to mention some of those benefits. And the Times reports on the 30th of March, latest figures from the NHS suggest that since the contract began, the data system has delivered more than 110,000 extra operations and cut the number of patients waiting more than 28 days for a cancer diagnosis by 6.8%. The Times also reports on the 30th of March that a total of 123 hospital trusts out of 205 are using the Federated Data Platform, or the FDP, which is the NHS-founded platform that Palantir has been given the contract to run, found, and manage. And that is according to the latest NHS data. So 123 hospitals out of the 205 are using this platform that Palantir has been given the contract to found, run, and manage. It's called Federated Data Platform, or FDP. And 80 are reporting benefits by the end of February. So this clearly does have some benefits. One of them, again, according to the Times, on your screens now. This is, again, another benefit. One key gripe is that the NHS records from different parts of the system are not joined up. For example, Accident and emergency consultants cannot access a patient's GP record to find out if they have any underlying health conditions. The federated data platform, in other words, the joined up, all-seeing evil eye of Lord Saruman, which is called the Palantir stone in the Lord of the Rings, the company Palantir running the federated data platform, it launched in 2023, and it was designed to overcome this blindness of a non-joined up system, to overcome this by linking up data from different NHS IT systems, allowing medical records to flow freely between different hospitals. Now, put like that, it sounds quite benign. And again, to continue still manning the case for Palantir before we, after still manning it, demolish it. This also, interestingly, has some public support. Back in February 2024, The Times reported in an article headlined, "The public back patient passports to share medical records with any doctor." That article subheaded "Single digital system recommended by the Times Health Commission." So the Times newspaper itself backed this, by the way, in 2024. "Single digital system recommended by the Times Health Commission would track a patient's records for life, allowing any GP, NHS hospital, pharmacy, or social care agency to access information." So the Times and the public backed giving a company, not necessarily Palantir at the time because it hadn't won the contract yet, but a company, control over a unified database that unifies all of our health data under one system, so that doctors in hospital can see our GP records. For example, for those in America, our general practitioner records or GP records are the first point of access to the national health system here in the UK. You go and see your GP, who is a local doctor in a GP surgery. They have a set of records that apparently hospitals couldn't access. And this system unifies all those records under one database. Of course, it's one national database. And that is too much power for one man to have, as they said of Malcolm X in the Spike Lee movie about him. So fine, if it's too much power for Malcolm X, it's certainly too much power for Peter Thiel and Alex Karp. This is a problem, folks. However, we're still on the still manning phase of this situation. Let's give the case for it. So according to the Times, the public backed having a unified database. And we're going to read from that article. "Every NHS patient should have their health information digitally stored in one place so that any doctor treating them can access their records no matter where they are." That's from the Times Health Commission conclusion. And it found that 8 in 10 people support the creation of patient passports that would provide a single system to keep track of medical records throughout a person's life. So far, so good and benign sounding to continue, and which could be accessed seamlessly across GPs, general practitioners, NHS hospitals, pharmacies, and social care. Sounds quite reasonable, doesn't it? The proposal is the first of 10 key recommendations in the Times Health Commission report, which is being published following a year-long inquiry and amid widespread backing for a data revolution in healthcare. Now, the issue is, folks, that when put like that, it is quite evident that there's strong public backing and institutional backing in the form of the Times Health Commission for a unified database. And the case made is quite a convincing case, especially as is done in that article, which we'll publish tomorrow in the written version of this stream via the Radical Dispatch. And we'll publish a link to the Times Health Commission report that was informing this conclusion. And you will see that, especially when put like that, and provided examples of real life scenarios where patients have actually suffered real life harms because of mistakes made in hospitals due to doctors being unable to access their GP records or their records held by the doctor who sees them at the first point of entry into the health service in the GP surgery. Of course, there are real life examples provided by the Times Health Commission and the Times article of where that has gone wrong due to incomplete patient health record access. Now, those examples will be used to convince the public and the institutions of this country of the benefits of a unified data system. And they have been used in that way, and they're cited in this Times article. And the Times article on the 4th of February 2024 continues. A YouGov polling for the Commission shows 81% of the public back its key recommendation of NHS digital health accounts called patient passports, with only 10% against. Only 10% of the public opposed it in 2024, but that's since changed. We're coming to why. Some 89% said patients should automatically be allowed access to their own medical records. Similar systems are already in place. So similar systems, unified health databases are already in place in where? In Spain. This is according to the Times. In Spain, in Singapore, Estonia, Israel, and Denmark, empowering patients and freeing medics from bureaucracy. Presently, there are between 40 and 60 different types of electronic patient records within the NHS. So 40 to 60 different types of databases needing to be unified into one, the Commission heard, while around 10% of hospitals are entirely paper-based, which is quite laughable in 2026 to still have a paper-based system. Admirable, though, if the reason for doing so, if their reason for being Luddites is in a very quintessentially British way, two fingers up to the Skynet system or to the system of control known as the Matrix. I mean, if they are doggedly holding out with paper-based systems in 2026 only because they hate technocracy, credit to them, though of course we would advise them that there are alternatives, again, which we are going to come to. Again, from the 4th of February in the Times on your screens now to read that. The Times polling, according to the Times, polling shows that 56% of the public agree that the convenience of being able to easily book appointments and access care outweighed any risk to the privacy or security of their medical records, compared to 22% who disagreed. This is from 2024, right? Meanwhile, 68% of the public would be happy for the NHS to allow other medical staff or clinicians to access their records. So these are all the benefits of a unified database, which eventually went to Palantir. Now, what we're going to tell you is that was 2 years ago. Now, what's happened in the course of those 2 years is two things. And those two things, we would argue, are responsible for the way in which the government is pulling back now and inquiring into officially triggering the break clause in this Palantir contract. Now, of course, the cynical reason why Keir Starmer's government is doing this is because they are fending off an insurgency against their own party on the left. The Liberal Democrats, full disclosure, yours truly stood as a Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate in London's Hampstead and Kilburn seat back in 2015 and left them because of their globalist position vis-a-vis China and their tolerance of China's Uyghur Muslim genocide. So, full disclosure, no longer a member, no longer agree with the Liberal Democrats' globalist position. Nevertheless, on this, credit where credit is due, the Liberal Democrats and the UK Green Party, led by that rather strange figure, Zach Palantir, of the now infamous gyrating on stage with gimps at Trafalgar Square a couple of days ago, while his deputy leader appears to be an uber ultra-Orthodox conservative Muslim whose wife wears a full face veil. And meanwhile, the Green Party has what can only be described as semi-naked male gimps gyrating on stage to the sound of techno music. Very much cognitive dissonance on display there by Mohsin Ali, the deputy leader, the very Muslim deputy leader of the Green Party, while his leader, Zach Palantir, behaves in that way. One wonders who's really in control of that party. Nevertheless, the reason that they're relevant here is because they, again, credit where credit is due, have joined the globalist Liberal Democrats in protesting and leading an insurgency against Keir Starmer's Labour Party in government over this Palantir issue. They've joined forces with the British Medical Association, the BMA, and they have, as a result, influenced government ministers to trigger investigations into whether or not the break clause can be triggered against Palantir, causing the UK government to leave their contract, their £330 million contract with Palantir. What are the objections? And this is the point now. Everything we've mentioned, some of the pros and the public having 2 years ago been in favor of this, but two years has meant a few things have happened. One of them is that the entire world has observed Israel's behavior in Gaza and its ethnic cleansing. By the way, we don't say this lightly, and there's a reason we don't use the word genocide. Being a law graduate myself, we at Radical Media here take the view that the law and due process must be respected and be allowed to take its course. So in the question as to whether or not this is genocide, we defer to the former Supreme Court Justice of the UK, Lord Jonathan Sumption, who we've published here in Radical Media before. We will publish again tomorrow the links to this, where Lord Sumption has taken the view, absent a formal determination in the International Criminal Court, that under his expert view, it appeared what Israel did in Gaza did appear to be genocide. Now, with respect to Lord Sumption's view, we stop short and say ethnic cleansing, because the legal test for ethnic cleansing is not as strict as the legal test for genocide. And ethnic cleansing in the English language suffices to describe the sheer horror of what Israel engaged in Gaza, though, of course, the legal judgment of genocide is left to the International Criminal Court if and when it makes such a judgment. So we respect the legal process, and we're not Lord Sumption, of course, and of course respect his right to come to his own conclusion. But the reason we mention that here is because Palantir provided the AI surveillance, the military targeting software, to the Israeli government to help them engage in whatever you want to call what happened in Gaza. Surely we can all agree it was incredibly excessive, disproportionate use of force against not just the terrorists of Hamas, who, of course, are enemies to our civilization and must be opposed, but also to the general and average person, human being in Gaza. So there are serious concerns around the way the Israeli government used AI, or artificial intelligence, to decide who to target in Gaza, and the software that they used was provided to them by Palantir. That's one concern that has arisen over the course of the last 2 years. And the second, which is, it predates the use of AI software in Israel's ethnic cleansing of Gaza, but perhaps informs the skepticism over that. And if not for this first concern, perhaps the second one that we've just mentioned would have been received in a bit more of a charitable or generous light. But because of the first one, people have now got their let's just say, are already scratching their heads. And that first one we've already mentioned is the way in which Palantir was involved in managing the COVID crisis across the West. So here in the UK government, and we'll speak to that, here in the UK, we had a national lockdown, as we mentioned earlier. And the lockdown lasted many, many months on end. We were not allowed to leave our house for months on end. Americans listening, please understand something when we're now talking about the power Palantir had over our country here. It is important that you understand we don't have a federal system here in the UK. And so we were placed under national lockdown. By now, you should all agree, under false pretenses. That, by the way, should no longer be pretty much in dispute. It should be pretty much accepted that they were all under all COVID mandates were under false pretenses. But Palantir had a direct managerial role in the way in which we were placed under lockdown for many months. We weren't allowed out of our homes except for 15 minutes a day alone, not with anybody else. It is insane to think back at what we were subjected to. Children weren't allowed to go to school. Grieving families weren't allowed to visit their dying ones in hospital, and their dying ones were many, many elderly were forced to die alone in segregated wards behind plastic screens, and funerals were held in isolation. It is an abomination what happened in this country under the COVID period. And that's just the lockdown. Then, of course, there were these insane mask mandates forcing everybody to be gagged using surgical masks that are designed to prevent the transfer of blood, droplets, liquid droplets from the mouth and nose of the surgeon into the patient, and splashes coming the opposite way. Those cloth masks are not designed to prevent tiny virus particles that are many manifold times smaller than the holes in those cloth masks. And yet we were told to put on these useless cloth masks, which was all theater. Otherwise, we weren't allowed to leave the home and interact for our essential services, such as going to the store to buy our groceries. And then, in addition, the worst of them all were the mandated COVID jabs. And we were told that if we did not take them under a policy of no jab, no job, we would lose our jobs. And before anyone argues over this, I personally lost my job as a national broadcaster on LBC, Global's LBC, on a weekend, very popular, mind you, talk show, which had over 500,000 listeners every weekend, even though I took the 2 COVID jabs under duress for not wanting to lose my family's only source of income. And therefore, under duress, trying to hold on to my job, took those 2 jabs, and then they sacked me anyway because I boycotted the booster shot in solidarity with all the unvaccinated, because the idiots, the absolute maniacs, started suggesting that the unvaccinated should never be allowed to leave their homes, including people at my former station, such as Nick Ferrari and others, who took that position and argued for it on air. It is insane, the position that people took, and all of those positions are online. The internet never forgets, including Nick Ferrari's, who still has his job at LBC. All those positions are online that all these media pundits such as Piers Morgan himself took, and he keeps me blocked online for calling him out till this day on that position. They all took the pro-mandate positions. They all kept their jobs. And Palantir, this is the relevance of the point, Palantir was the company given the job by the government to manage the data flows during that period by running the daily COVID dashboard. Do you remember the COVID dashboard? It was the dashboard that the government and the NHS used officially to determine the COVID statistics on a daily basis, which would inform their policy and informed policies such as their mandates, including the lockdown, the mask mandate, and the jab mandates. Palantir was running that system for the government. So over the last 2 years, those 2 things, the COVID scandal and the way in which it was an absolute abuse of our individual liberty, and the perma war and the military industrial complex's use of AI targeting software and software databases provided by Palantir in wars abroad, those 2 factors have led to a change and a turnaround in British public opinion when it comes to which companies should be provided the privilege of having access to the nation's unified data software. And it is indeed a privilege. It's a very, very powerful position to be granted. And you can see here the CEO of Palantir, according to Bloomberg, admitting how powerful this privilege is. And that is something we're going to play for you now in video clip. On your screens is the Bloomberg report. I'm not sure we should even sell this to some of our clients, says Palantir CEO Alex Karp, when speaking about the power of the databases and the technology that they're developing. So we'll just blow this up on your screens for you and play the video of Alex Karp saying this.
Attributes, like they can give you reasoning, but you can't import that reasoning into your enterprise. What AIP does is allow you to take the benefits of the large language model, enhance them with algorithms that we help you build, and roll it securely across your whole enterprise. And what does that mean? It means you get all the benefits of a large language model in your enterprise today, not in 5 years, not something that writes poetry. We're not offering people poetry writing in their enterprise. We're offering things that are so powerful that in reality, I'm not sure we should even sell this to some of our clients. Large language models have certain attributes.
And there you have it. Something so powerful that even the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, is not sure we should sell to the clients. Now, before you begin assuming that such an intervention by the CEO of the company that we're discussing perhaps may be out of context or a one-off, don't worry, we're going to show you many other such quotes by the CEO, Alex Karp, which demonstrates that he is indeed literally the true life Lex Luthor, the evil baddie in Superman movies. In fact, Lex Luthor was probably, the writers of Superman probably time traveled to 2026 and witnessed Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and decided to write their characters into the movies. It is surreal how these people are unabashed and unashamed of what they are doing with regards to our civil liberties. So the first concern is around COVID. Again, now we're going to read to you from a Times article, 30th of March. Palantir won the contract to join up NHS data systems in 2023 and began introducing it to trusts the following year. And the relevant part here, it was also involved in the successful vaccine rollout program. Palantir also built the COVID-19 dashboard in the UK, which provided rolling daily updates on deaths, hospital admissions, and vaccines, and was essential to the pandemic response. Now, if you remember, it was that daily death figure which was responsible largely for the panic around COVID, which led to the lockdowns, the mask mandates, and the vaccine mandates, all on behalf of Big Pharma. So Palantir was running the system that was the ammunition for Big Pharma forcing government to bring in the COVID mandates. All globalists, of course, on the senior level, working behind the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization agenda as they were, had a synchronized response around the world, and Palantir was essential through their data COVID dashboard and data gathering was essential in providing the ammunition in the form of data for that synchronized response around the world. The Times also reports on the 4th of February. Now, this is important. Sir Patrick Vallance. Oh dear. Who's he? Remember who he is. Sir Patrick Vallance, chairman, now chairman of the Natural History Museum, but that's not the relevant part. Former government chief science advisor during the COVID period, right? Sir Patrick Vallance, who gave evidence to the commission, that's the Times Health Commission, that concluded that we do need this unified database system. So they are using the very people that enforce the COVID mandates to tell us that we need a unified system to have a unified response, such as a national lockdown. It's all backslapping and patting each other on the backs as they all listen to each other, providing evidence to talk to each other to justify each other's decisions in a mutually beneficial way. So Sir Patrick Vallance, government chief science advisor, who gave evidence to the commission, said companies that invest in research and development tend to do better than those that don't. And the same is true for healthcare systems. Investment and application of innovation from prevention through to cures is the route to sustainability. He's supporting the idea of giving this to companies that are able to do the job, such as Palantir. The reforms outlined by the Times Health Commission would help build upon the success of the NHS app, if you remember that, which has gained 33.6 million registered users since its launch 5 years ago. The NHS is also launching a federated data platform. That's the platform Palantir got the £330 million contract to eventually run. Remember, this is from 2024, which will bring together different databases within the hospital system. However, this platform does not include GP or social care data. So this is all, it was telegraphing what Palantir would eventually end up doing in the country. But back then, only 2 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago because of the way in which the world changed after COVID, it still wasn't seen as a big risk. Of course, we at Radical Media, and our regulars will know this, have been flagging this since day one. Now, in 2023, the Times reported, again, still related to the concern around COVID, the Times said in March 2020, at the height of the pandemic, the firm, Palantir, was given an emergency contract to corral data about the emerging crisis without competition. Interesting, right? It was given, right? Without competition, it was given this contract. Now, this is according to the Times. In 2023, Palantir was given a contract to run the COVID data system without competition. It was given £1 million in exchange for its work, but managed to turn that into a £23.5 million longer-term deal later that year, which was subject to legal challenge before its latest flip. Palantir had secured more than £37 million in contracts since 2020 from the NHS and the government. Now, the Times also reports on the 25th of February, 2023, about these similar concerns around the COVID period. Questions have also been raised about the connection between the state and the company, Palantir. Former Palantir officials have previously left Palantir to work for the UK government, while others have gone the other way, including Harjit Dhaliwal, the former Deputy Director of Data Services at NHS England, whom Palantir has said will not work on any NHS-related products. How interesting. So it's a two-way revolving door. The former Deputy Director of Data Services at NHS England now works for Palantir, and Palantir got the £330 million contract for the NHS to run their federated data systems and monopolize our entire health data in the country. So Palantir staff have gone to work for the NHS, and the NHS senior staff have gone on to work for Palantir. And this was a concern, as you can see here, that we raised in Radical Media on the 10th of July in 2023. And there you see the article, Every Single COVID Mandate Failed, Premium Radical Podcast. And it's something that we've been concerned about for a very long time. The uselessness, the utter uselessness of every single COVID mandate should be by now, no longer a topic for debate. It should no longer be controversial. There will still be some of those absolutely detached and divorced from reality, not even woke, but let's say beyond woke, a caricature of themselves, a parody, the sorts that wear 3 masks and still refuse to shake hands from fear of contracting COVID and still test every month and still require a negative test before traveling. Those sorts, they may still wish to defend COVID mandates. But of course, the normal person, and by now pretty much the cat's out the bag, will recognize that every single COVID mandate failed. And yet the company that was responsible for weaponizing COVID in order to sell its services to the NHS is the company that now has access to the entirety of our country's health data. Without competition, by the way, it was initially awarded the 1 million contract and eventually did have to compete with 2 other countries to get the 330 million pound contract. And we're going to come to which companies they were. They were Oracle and one UK company. We'll come to them at the end of this stream. But the point being, initially, they were awarded it without competition. It is very curious, isn't it? And guess what? The chief science advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, was on the Times Health Commission that recommended that this unified database contract be awarded to a company. And then Palantir, that was running that COVID dashboard for Sir Patrick Vallance, was awarded it without competition and £1 million. Very, very curious. So one of the concerns over the last 2 years has been the failed COVID mandates and that Palantir was involved in that. But a separate concern, as we've said, has been the AI, the fact that Palantir was used in the AI targeting in the Israel's ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And that's what we want to come to now. So again, we're going to demonstrate that from some of the reporting on it. So the Times reports on the 30th of March, 2026. That's yesterday's Times. And that should be on your screens now. We'll just read it for you. The contract has attracted controversy because of the company's work for the US military and intelligence services. One key system linked to Palantir is Project Maven, a US military AI program that analyzes surveillance data to identify potential targets. The company has also been accused of allowing its systems to be used to identify illegal immigrants to be targeted by ICE. Now, we suspect fewer people would be concerned about the way in which the company was used by ICE than they would be about the way in which it was used by Israel in Gaza, because, of course, the AI targeting during the ethnic cleansing in Gaza attracted a lot more concern around the world. But even the ICE scenario, what we're going to demonstrate here, the fact that Palantir has access to data that it's providing to ICE for immigration raids should be of concern to people after the killing, the effective execution of the disarmed US military health professional medical nurse, Alex Pretty. And the execution of Alex Pretty after he was disarmed and the subsequent disturbances that it led to, the civil disturbances, should be of concern to everybody. They were of concern to President Trump. But again, it was Palantir's data that was involved in the state overreach, just as it was during COVID, during the ICE raids that led to these civil disturbances and eventually led to President Trump even dismissing, if you recall, his Secretary Noem, who was in charge and leading on that, and rebuking publicly by distancing himself from Stephen Miller's position and from Kash Patel's position, who, if you remember, initially claimed that Alex Pretty was an assassin and he was seeking to assassinate ICE agents. Turns out he was a nurse treating injured army veterans in a military hospital and was disarmed prior to being shot in the head by ICE agents or border patrol agents in that case, working with ICE. So even President Trump had to distance himself. He removed Noem, Secretary of State for Homeland Security Noem, from her position after this. He removed the person that was placed in charge of the border patrol from his position, and he mixed things up and stopped the raids after those civil disturbances and the execution of Alex Pretty. But again, Palantir was involved in that state overreach, just as it was involved in the overreach in COVID mandates here in the UK, and just as it was involved in Netanyahu's overreach through the state of Israel and its ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And the theme here is that the beast system, or the AI, the technocratic surveillance system, does not concern itself with the humane concerns that others have when it comes to such overreach. And that is one of the things that we explained in this Radical Dispatch on the 29th of January 2026, headlined "Explaining Why American Citizen Alex Pretty Was Shot in the Back of the Head Live on Camera by US Agents." If you recall, in that Radical Dispatch, our regulars will remember, we cited here the Telegraph article, "Trump Splits with Vance Over the Minneapolis Shooting of Alex Pretty." Now, Vance is important here because Palantir founder Peter Thiel sponsored and subsidized J.D. Vance's entire career, not just his political career. Prior to that, his so-called literary career, which was really a front for his political career, and the novel that he was supposedly acclaimed for, which clearly the entire thing was fronted by Peter Thiel and Palantir money. J.D. Vance ended up a senator backed by Peter Thiel, and then in a deal struck by the tech bros and the PayPal mafia with President Trump to allow him to get back in for a second term. One of the deals that they made was that their man, the Manchurian candidate, J.D. Vance, gets to be vice president. But make no mistake, J.D. Vance is the Palantir Manchurian candidate placed on the inside of the Trump administration as the technocrats' man. And it is why, by the way, that people like Dominic Cummings here in the UK, who are so full of praise for the technocrats, such as Peter Thiel and Palantir and J.D. Vance, because they're all united behind the what's known as the Dark Enlightenment, which is those that believe in technocracy and data-run systems and wish to shrink the size of the state, not because they want decentralization, like most of us, but because they want to, after shrinking the size of the state, place it under mega corporation hands such as big tech. And so they will deceive you into believing they're on your side and they want to shrink the size of the state. But really, the agenda isn't to shrink it only to allow it to be decentralized. In other words, Frodo destroying the one ring to unite them all at the top of Mount Doom. That's not what they want. They want to shrink the size of the state so they can bring it all under the control of the mega big tech corporations such as Palantir. In other words, they're technocratic globalists. And that's where Dominic Cummings is as well. We've demonstrated, that's the former chief of staff of Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister here in the UK. We've demonstrated all of that here on Radical Media before, but we'll demonstrate it again by providing links for all of this in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. But again, back to the dangers of Palantir and the way in which they were President Trump distanced himself from them after the civil disturbances through the execution of Alex Pretty in the US due to those ICE raids. Again, we mentioned in that Radical Dispatch, you can go back to that, explaining why American citizen Alex Pretty was shot in the back of the head. That's from the 29th of January, 2026. We'll publish that again in tomorrow's written version of this stream. But for the meanwhile, the Times also reported on the 13th of January 2025 this concern around the way in which Palantir and AI software is being granted access to all of our data. And this article is headed, AI is reading scans and could soon prevent illness, according to Prime Minister Keir Starmer. That's from the Times on the 13th of Jan 2025. It reads, artificial intelligence is already advising doctors which patients to treat, writing up case notes, reading scans in the NHS, and the technology could soon help prevent illness. Go to the bottom of that quote, and it says, Palantir, the US company that runs the platform, is testing AI that automatically writes discharge letters after patients' treatments. That's the same Palantir with access to all of our health data that abused us during the COVID period by weaponizing our data to have us all put down into a multi-month national lockdown with only 15 minutes of sunlight break a day, and forced us to take injections against our will at risk of losing our jobs, and forced us to gag our faces just to control us. That's the same Palantir that now has access to software databases and is loading them with AI that will decide how and when we're treated and discharged. And by the way, they haven't stopped their AI targeting. Again, though the concerns raised about the Iranian theocracy are valid, that doesn't mean that everything that our own governments do in the conduct of that war shouldn't be left unscrutinized. So again, back to war. And the Times reports on the 3rd of March 2026, and this is on your screens now, headlined, How AI Helps 20 US Troops Do the Work of 2,000 in the Iran War. So they're still using Palantir for military operations. And this quote from the Times, we'll just read it for you. During the US-led invasion of Iraq, a 2,000-strong American intelligence unit was asked to identify targets on the ground for Western troops. In Operation Epic Fury against Iran, 20 troops can carry out the same workload. They're using software developed by the CIA-backed technology company Palantir, which uses artificial intelligence to choose and dismiss targets more quickly than the human brain can think. The Pentagon has been developing Project Maven with the help of Palantir since 2018, and the software is embodied in all US combatant commands. It uses AI and machine learning to crunch vast amounts of data, specifically for military targeting and surveillance. Experts compared it to a military version of Uber. Now, the point is that Palantir may well be efficient for use in war. That may well be the case. Alex Karp, its CEO, claims that when they used it for military targeting software using AI in Israel, in Gaza, when they did this, that they managed to, as a result of the AI targeting, have far fewer civilian casualties than without AI. And he claims the data supports this. It may well do. It will always be more efficient. In fact, efficiency is always the reason used by tyrants to allow them to take control. It's always about efficiency, whether it's efficiently removing certain ideological opponents from the system, such as the tyrant Hitler used the excuse of efficiency to remove Jews from Europe because it was the most final solution, the efficient solution to this age-old problem, as he alluded to, or whether it's Stalin and the use of his gulags to enforce the 5-year plans for efficiency. Ultimately, efficiency will always be used. Now, it isn't disputed that it may actually be more efficient to use AI for military targeting. That is something that, again, the data may well support. The concern is the ethical concern of allowing the same companies that have a license to kill abroad access to the domestic data of citizens. Because, of course, those citizens, the concern is, may well be in the end subjected to the same sort of targeting if they are defined as enemies of the state for opposing the powers that be than they are using abroad in war. And the COVID experience demonstrates that we are, against our will, subject to the whim of these companies. And so there must be a separation of powers, and it is concerning that these companies have absolute control not only over our domestic data, but also over foreign wars as well. Now, again, the Times reports on the 3rd of March, 2026, reading from it, Brian Clark, a senior fellow and director of the Center for Defense Concepts and Technology at the Hudson Institute, a think tank, said the system allowed planners to organize kill chains and orchestrate the movement and actions of hundreds of military units. This kind of work would take days using computer spreadsheets, but now planners can complete operational plans within hours or less, he said. The British military is pouring millions of pounds into the Palantir technology. To win wars, experts believe nations will have to capture data faster than the adversary. Data could be provided from myriad of sources, such as satellites, surveillance aircraft, and assets on the ground. Why this is important, as is on your screens now, is in particular with regards to drone warfare. So on your screens, you should be able to see now an image both of the NATO alliance drones made in the USA and the Shahed drones made by Russia and deployed in Iran. Shahed 136 versus Lucas. And the software used to command those or commandeer those drones in their strikes is AI military targeting software. And that's where Palantir becomes very useful. Drone warfare is at the forefront of modern warfare, and the way in which the Iranian theocracy has been launching drones into its Sunni Muslim Arab neighboring Gulf Straits demonstrates the point. So it isn't being disputed that Palantir software, helped and funded as it is by the CIA and the Pentagon, is effectively military software, which is giving us the cutting edge in our military operations abroad. And in fact, may end up through its efficiency in resulting in fewer civilian casualties. That isn't being disputed. The issue is one of separation of powers and checks and balances. Should that same software company be provided access domestically to all of our personal data? And the answer is quite clearly no. And the experience of COVID is enough of an example to demonstrate why not. But if you did need more convincing, well, here is Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp, saying that they are happy on occasion to kill their enemies. And any company that is so comfortable with making such pronouncements publicly about war shouldn't really be granted access to all of our personal private data as well. That's really the concern. Here is the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, Peter Thiel's man, who very clearly, as we said, hiding in plain sight. They're telling us exactly what they're about. And this is why we say this man is very much like Lex Luthor, unashamedly telling us what they're doing because they know that it brings so much value in the form of AI-based efficiency. But that doesn't answer the question of being too much power for one entity to have. And that, of course, is the real moral of the story in the novel, Tolkien's novel, Lord of the Rings, that Peter Thiel has named his company after. And that is that the one ring to unite them all should really be destroyed. Take a listen to this. CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp.
Investors on the line. Is there anything you'd like to say before we end the call?
We're doing it. We're doing it. And I'm sure you're enjoying this as much as I am. Let's not talk to analysts about the burden of being right, our burdens of investing in ontology, our burdens of actually looking at the math, the burden of reading what the rule of 40 is, the burden of being honest about what an enterprise software company is, or the burden of explaining to your friends that you're really happy. Maybe we should just stop talking about it. I'm very happy to have you along for the journey, and you are partners for us. Every Palantirian, we are crushing it. Everyone else who's listening, we are dedicating our company. We have dedicated our company to the service of the West and the United States of America, and we're super proud of the role we play, especially in places we can't talk about. And we love our success in the U.S. and globally. Also, you know, we are doing in the United Kingdom and many other places. Palantir is here to disrupt and make the institutions we partner with the very best in the world, and when it's necessary, to scare enemies and on occasion kill them. And we hope you're in favor of that. We hope you're enjoying being a partner, and we're really happy and very, very focused on what we're doing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes Q&A for today's call.
Now, that isn't AI. That is a real Palantir meeting. That is their real CEO, Alex Karp, saying that Palantir is happy to scare people and, on occasion, kill them. Now, that's fine. It's a Pentagon and CIA-funded AI military targeting software company. Fine. You know, sometimes war is necessary. We're not pacifists here. But should such a company, with their CEO acting like a Lex Luthor, real-life Lex Luthor from the Superman movies, should such a company also be granted total access to our health data? That is the concern. Or run our COVID response as they did through their COVID dashboard and so phenomenally mess it up as they did because they're globalists. They didn't really mess it up. It was done on purpose. That is the concern. Should they be granted access in the US to the Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Border Patrol agencies so they can use the same military targeting software against domestic undocumented migrants? That is the concern. And so clearly they say they don't mind killing people in some circumstances. Well, US citizen Alex Pretty was disarmed and then shot in the head and executed. You know, it is important that companies that have a license to kill, clearly as Palantir does, don't have control over our domestic policy. And that is the main concern. And the fact they're able to boast about this so openly should be concerning. Again, here is the CEO, Alex Karp, fantasizing about how he would like to treat his enemies. And again, in the context of everything we've just told you, this really, it should be seen as more than just a joke.
And I also think you often need a lower purpose. Like the higher purpose for me.
What's a lower purpose?
Well, I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us. So that's my lower purpose. And, yeah, and others. But the higher purpose for me was to get this nation to be the preeminent power in the world, because whatever faults we have, they're nothing like anyone else's. You need to.
And of course, we've mentioned the way in which their software is used to control the drones. And there he is openly fantasizing about using drones with his software to spray fentanyl-laced poison on his enemies. I mean, yes, that was a joke there, clearly, but the idea that they use their software to kill people is very real. And again, it's not appropriate for such a company as a result to have access to our private healthcare data domestically. And that is why the British Medical Association have come out to oppose them in the UK. Here on the 25th of November 2023, the Times had raised the British, some people's concerns around this. Palantir's NHS deal, are we handing our health data to Big Brother? So that was raised by the Times. Of course, we have also raised in Radical Media in the past, such as in this Radical Dispatch from the 12th of June 2025, after the LA riots, called LA Riots, Musk, Thiel, JD Vance, and Palantir, a failed palace coup against Trump, because that's back when before Marjorie Taylor Greene's falling out with Trump, when she blocked the bill in the US to grant the federal government control over all of AI across the Federation of the United States, but rather, because of Marjorie Taylor Greene's bill, it was deregulated to state level and thereby decentralized. And at the time, Elon Musk opposed this. He wanted to grant the federal government control over all of that data in the US, because of course their man JD Vance is on the inside, and it would have meant fusing that with Palantir through JD Vance and Peter Thiel. And that's when Elon Musk decided to rebel against Trump and suggest that JD Vance would make a better president, if you remember that. Now, we reported on that on the 12th of June 2025. And here is the dispatch headline there. We'll republish that in tomorrow's written Radical Dispatch. And it coincided, again, there you can see from the Times on the 6th of Jan 2025. He did the same thing to Nigel Farage here in the UK. Elon Musk then openly rebelled against Nigel Farage because of Farage's alliance with Trump, and instead backed Rupert Lowe for the further right fringe party, Restore Britain, that is seeking to split the right-wing populist vote in the UK. So Musk backed a Farage competitor, Rupert Lowe, in the UK, and he backed Vance against Trump in America. And all of that began when Trump refused to grant the control over all AI in the US on a federal level to the federal government, which they wanted, because it would have meant Palantir, that has federal government contracts, would have got access to all of that data. We'll remind you all of that in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. But these were the concerns, and this is why it is important that in the UK as well, this issue is raised. And we remind you again, on the 11th of January 2024, Radical Media, in an article headline, "Breaking Epstein Judge Unseals Richard Branson and Photo of Lord Mandelson," we remind you that we published this Daily Mail article from the 30th of May 2023, which is on your screens now, headlined "Exclusive: The Jeffrey Epstein Files. Trove of never-before-seen emails and calendars gives unprecedented insight into late pedophiles' network of power and influence that includes Chris Rock, Peter Thiel, and Richard Branson." Peter Thiel, in that article, is mentioned. We'll read it for you. Tech billionaire and early Facebook investor Peter Thiel had several meetings with Epstein, the calendars show. During one stretch in 2014, Thiel appears to have met Epstein 3 times in quick succession, at a time when he was on the board of Facebook and in charge of venture capital firm Founders Fund. He was also the chairman of analytics company Palantir, which works closely with the Department of Defense. The logs show that in September 2014, Epstein's schedule listed Thiel under people to see. The two men met for dinner at Epstein's New York mansion on the 12th, with Woody Allen present, the schedule says. The following day, Epstein met Thiel on his own from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., after which Bill Burns, the current director of the CIA, who was Deputy Secretary of State at the time, joined them for an hour. The day after that, Epstein planned a lunch and said that maybe Peter Thiel would come. The two men were scheduled for lunch the following week, and the entry lists Thiel's personal assistant and their number. Thiel did not respond to the Daily Mail's request for comment. So consider Palantir's involvement in our national COVID response and in AI military targeting in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, and in their role in the civil disturbances in the US through ICE. After which President Trump had to distance himself from them because of their overreaction. So consider all of that, and then understand Peter Thiel's associations with Epstein and how they serve globalist technocracy and the COVID agenda led by the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum, and you can begin to understand what the problem is here and why Palantir is so dangerous. We will again bring all of that to your the written version and links of all of that in tomorrow's written Radical Dispatch. But to conclude here from the Times, again, to quote from the 30th of March article, "The British Medical Association, for all these reasons that we've just explained, has called on NHS England to end the government contract, citing privacy fears about patient data being handed to a US tech giant and ethical concerns about working with a company involved in warfare and human rights violations. The BMA said the company was an unacceptable choice for the Federated Data Platform, which is the platform that the UK government set up for Palantir to found. It's the unified database. It agreed to lobby at a national level against the continued introduction of Palantir software into health data systems and to terminate all existing contracts that the NHS holds with Palantir. And some professors who have raised concerns. According to the Times, on the 25th of November 2023, Eleanor Simple, professor of computer science at King's College London, said, "We have experienced several attempts over the past years to achieve similar aims. No matter how well intended, they fail because of a common set of concerns around data privacy, stewardship, and governance. It is unclear to me whether lessons have been learned from these experiences," she said. "With every failed attempt, more people have opted out and public trust has been eroded." Palantir has a very concerning history in the US of expansive surveillance and targeting in ways that are intrusive and could undermine the rights of vulnerable groups, according to Meg Davis, a professor of digital and health rights at Warwick University. So finally, there were alternatives, and we just want to leave this here with you because some may be thinking, well, then what's the solution? We don't want to be Luddites and refuse all technology and advancement. Well, really, there were alternatives. The Times reports on that 30th March article that there were two other bids for the contract. One from the US software company Oracle, that many of you would have heard of, and another from a consortium of British tech companies led by the firm Quantexa. Now, Quantexa states, and again, here's the article for you from the 16th of October, 2023 in the Times, headlined, "Will handle NHS data better than the Americans," Quantexa says. And in this article, according to the Times, Vishal Maria, who's the chief executive of Quantexa, urged the NHS to go with a British company whose staff are, quote, "all one hop away from the NHS." Maria said NHS medical records were one of the most important assets the UK had, and that it was vital to ensure the data was put into a platform founded in the country. He's right. Of course, the traitor Keir Starmer gave it to the globalists at Palantir anyway. One wonders why. And this is before the downfall of Peter Mandelson, so you can begin to understand why once we, as we did, brought Epstein into the occasion. Of course, the compromat was the leverage to get government leaders, such as prime ministers, to do what they want against the interests of their own country. And that's what we argue here at Radical Media has been going on. It's why our country is being destroyed against its own interests, in the interests of globalists who, not just on technocracy, but on immigration, on national security and everything else, are ruining our country. So to continue reading from that Times quote, Maria warned against contracts with a single supplier that risks vendor lock-in, saying companies in such a dominant position risk having people over a barrel by trapping data in software they control. He added that the way his software was designed meant that he had no access to the data or to the platform once it was deployed. Well, folks, these are the concerns, and that's all we have time for here today on the Warrior Creed live stream. But as we are sure you will agree, they are some very serious concerns, and Palantir and the way in which they are controlled by globalist technocrats should be of concern both to US and UK governments, and in particular in the UK, where there's no separation of powers. It is too much power for one company to have. And the fact they're hiding in plain sight, the fact that Peter Thiel has named his company after the all-seeing stones controlled by the evil wizards, Saruman and others, in the Lord of the Rings trilogy by Tolkien, should suffice in demonstrating to everybody what the concerns are here. To have a unified database of everything controlled by the Internet of Things run by one company called Palantir, which also happens to be a military AI targeting company, is pretty much bringing you into Skynet domain territory, right? In the Terminator movies, Skynet. I mean, that is effectively what that movie was about, as was RoboCop. There's a reason that those movies resonated with Gen Xers, such as myself here, yours truly, at the age of 48. And we've grown up skeptical of such power, computerized as it is, being given to corporates. And we would argue to you here at Radical Media that that's where we pretty much are now. We've arrived, and it's time to oppose all of this before it's too late. Oppose Skynet, oppose all these technocratic companies seeking to control us. And we will, as usual, publish the written version of this stream, The Radical Dispatch, tomorrow. Go to majidnawaz.substack.com and become a premium subscriber for access to the podcast version of this stream and the paywalled content in The Radical Dispatch and other paywalled content, We can't do this work without your support, so do please become premium subscribers at majidnawaz.substack.com under the name Radical Media. Until next week, you've been watching the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical Majid Nawaz, and we thank you for your time.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Good service announcement brought to you in part by Warrior